guys, it's Sam, and I've transformed myself into an X-Man. X-woman. Mutant. Woman. And this is my November wrap-up. I read 7 books this month, which was pretty good considering that a couple weeks in there I wasn't feeling super great, and I also had a weekend where I was down in Charleston at Y'all Fest, so all things considered, I did pretty well this month. The first book that I picked up was Uprooted by Naomi Novik. Now, I've already talked about this book a ton so far on my channel and Twitter and basically everywhere that I can discuss books, but I've done a full spoiler-free review as well as a gush on this. It is about our main character, Anastasia, and she lives outside of a haunted, kind of evil wood, a magical forest. And there is a wizard called the Dragon who protects their village, but in return, he expects them to give one of their daughters every 10 years, who goes and lives with him for 10 years, no one knows what happens, etc. Of course, Anastasia is that girl that gets chosen and everything takes off from there. This story is everything that I ever wanted. It has a stubborn protagonist, it has witty banter as far as the romance, it has beautiful world building, I like the magic. It also combines a lot of Slavic fairy tales, which was wonderful. It's not for everybody though, so I definitely recommend you guys go and check out my review, but it was everything to me, and that's why I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was Just Visiting by Dahlia Adler. This review copy was sent to me by the author because she saw that I posted my Waiting on Wednesday blog post about this book before it came out, and I wanted it so bad because I'd heard such amazing things about it, and I love Dahlia Adler's other book, which I've talked about before, so she sent me a review copy, so I'm very, very grateful to her for that. This is a contemporary YA about 2 best friends, Reagan and Victoria, who live in a small town in Kansas. Both of them want to get out of that small town for different reasons, and they are going on different road trips to nearby colleges to pick a college to go together in the fall. I absolutely loved this book. This book quickly became my new favorite contemporary, and I do not say that lightly, although I do not really tend to bond much with contemporary books. This book I definitely bonded with. It pulled up all these feelings of nostalgia and of being about 18 years old, ready to go to college, and those feelings that you have of trying to find yourself and trying to decide if you want to keep parts of yourself that you were in high school or leave some of that behind, become a new person, and leaving your family and leaving your friends and discovering new romances and everything. It is amazing. I seriously had chills so many times. Even though my situation is very different than either of the characters in this book, it still managed to evoke those feelings of nostalgia in a positive way for the end of the high school experience and for just moving forward and becoming your own person. And also, the friendship in here is so amazing. It is not perfect. It is a flawed friendship. They are 2 flawed human beings. They don't get along always. They keep secrets from each other, but they ultimately are such good friends. There's also really great romance elements in here, and there's definitely a theme of consent through all of Dahlia's books, which I think is wonderful. There is sexual content in these books, but it's not in a vulgar way, and it's not in a way that I don't feel like is necessary. I always feel like the sexual content in Dahlia's books is realistic. Dahlia is also really great about having a lot of diversity in her books. So one of the main characters, Reagan, comes from a lower kind of income family. She lives in a trailer park. Victoria, the other main character, is a Mexican-American girl. Her mother is deaf, so there is sign language in this book. One of the love interests is an Indian boy, and one of the other characters is a Chinese-American who was adopted. So there is a ton of different diversity here, but not in a way where it's shoved in your face and feels like Dahlia is just trying to tick a bunch of boxes in her books. It honestly feels like a very real story because diversity is real and having a diverse cast is important, and I loved everything about this book. I'm going to be doing a full review on this, so I should probably stop gushing about it so much, but I loved it so much. 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. This is a graphic novel that has gotten a ton of buzz on BookTube, but it's basically about a girl who is a shapeshifter and she becomes the sidekick to a very well-known supervillain. But it doesn't just stop there. Basically, this whole book is about deconstructing the tropes of fantasy and who's a villain and who's a hero and things like that. I went into it with super high expectations and I was a little bit let down, admittedly. I know a lot of people that love this were fans of the webcomic when it was a webcomic, and I'd never had that background with it. And I also feel like there were certain elements that weren't explored enough. There are 2 characters who are definitely gay in here, and Noelle Stevenson has come out and said that she wishes that she would have made it more explicit within this book that these are 2 gay characters, because apparently a lot of people pretend that they're just friends, and they are definitely not, but that's an element where I feel like I needed more from that. I needed that to be very explicitly said in a book like this, but I did love a lot of elements of it. I also didn't really connect with the main character, which kept me from giving it a more higher rating, but ultimately I did think it was a lot of fun, and I gave it 3 stars. I then picked up Black Widow Volume 1, The Finely Woven Thread, and this is a Black Widow, not origin story, but it's just following Black Widow between jobs, kind of. It's her removing all of that red from her ledger and all those kinds of things, and I'm not really sure where exactly in the universe it sits, like where in the timeline it sits, and I think that would have been important for me to know going into it, but this is a Black Widow that I wasn't quite expecting. She is definitely more depressed, more lonely, not really the strong character that I'm used to seeing, not really the loner in a lone wolf way, more of the loner in a I'm very damaged way, which is still incredibly valid, but just something I wasn't very much expecting, and I found that this story was a little bit confusing. I didn't really get the significance of things. I didn't really have any desire to continue with it. I think I will continue it and see if I like the second volume a little bit more, but the way that the villains were introduced and kind of what was going on, I found a little bit confusing, and I had a really hard time connecting with it, so I gave this one 2 stars. I then picked up Winter by Marissa Meyer. This is the 4th and final book in the Lunar Chronicles series. This book is being talked about everywhere. I've already done a review and discussion on this. The review does have spoilers because it's the last book in the series, and I honestly feel like anybody that's going to be watching the review is going to have read the rest of the books in the series and then want to probably be discussing it. You're probably not going to watch a review before you read it yourself. So go and check that out if you have read the book. I will say I enjoyed it. I thought it was a satisfying-ish ending. It's satisfying in some ways and unsatisfying in others. I felt that this book was too long. I also felt that the world building from the rest of the series kind of suffered and showed up that it hasn't been a ton of world building in this series so far, and that a lot of things about this book were convenient. Ultimately, I did enjoy it. Again, I thought it could have been about 200 pages shorter and a little less convenient, but I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. I then read Everneath by Brody Ashton. This is the first book in what is described as a Hades and Persephone retelling, but honestly, it's not really a Hades and Persephone retelling, at least in book 1. This is the first book in a trilogy, and in this book, our main character, Nikki, is released from a place called the Everneath. It is a world kind of between the afterlife and our world where Everlings, which are immortal creatures, kind of like gods in a way, but they aren't really explained a ton. One of my issues with the book, honestly, is the lack of explanation, but Everlings basically feed on people for 100 years, and then that is the way that they sustain their life. It's not like a vampiric feed, it's more of like an energy feed. Again, it's not completely explained, so I'm having a hard time with this description myself. But during the 100 years, only 6 months passes here above ground. So we have Nikki at the beginning of the book getting released, and she's coming home, and she has 6 months, again, before she gets taken again. So during that 6 months, she is trying to kind of right some of the wrongs of what happened before she left, and there is a boy that she was with before she left, so there's a love triangle going on between the Everling that took her and the boy that was here before, and there's kind of a lot going on that isn't really explained. You're really thrown into the story where the first half of it, I was like, what is going on? And did I miss something? And am I reading the second book? And none of this is being explained. It's really written a lot through flashbacks, so you'll have the current things going on and then it flashing back to, oh, when this happened, and then it'll flash back to when that happened and show you. So ultimately, I don't think this was super well executed. I wanted to like it more than I did, and honestly, this book especially is not a Hades and Persephone retelling. It is an Orpheus and Eurydice retelling, honestly, and I wish it would have been actually advertised as such, because I think the Orpheus and Eurydice elements are done super, super well, but I don't think that the Hades and Persephone elements that I was looking for were done well at all. Maybe book 2 has that element, because again, like I said, there's a love triangle, so maybe the Hades and Persephone part happens in book 2. I'm going to continue, because while I didn't enjoy it a lot, and while I had problems with it, I enjoyed enough elements of it to continue. So I gave this book 2 stars, but I'm going to continue with the rest of the series. We'll see how that goes. And the last book that I read this month was a reread, and that was Gathering Darkness by Morgan Rhodes. This is the 3rd book in the Fallen Kingdom series, and this was actually the first book that I read this year when it first came out. I read this book in preparation for the 4th book, which is Frozen Tides, which I currently have, and I'm reading. I was hoping to finish it before the end of the month, but I didn't, because I'm kind of spacing it out a little bit. But anyway, this is about this book. I've already read this one, like I said, so as you guys know, I loved this book so much. This book so far is my favorite in the series. I'm sure Frozen Tides will replace it, because every book in the series gets better for me and becomes my new favorite, so I'm sure Frozen Tides will replace this one, but this one is so good. I tabbed so many things, and basically all of these are Magnus and Cleo chapters, so if you guys have read the series, you know my thoughts and emotions about it. But again, absolutely love this reread. I always worry when I reread a favorite book that I'm not going to like it as much, but that did not happen with this. I loved discovering new things and kind of seeing connections that I didn't see reading it the first time through. Absolutely loved it. It was perfect to read it right before I read Frozen Tides. I loved it so much. Obviously, I gave this one, again, 5 out of 5 stars. So that is it for my November wrap-up. Comment down below and let me know your favorite book that you read this month. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!